Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 76 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. In this episode, we are going to be talking about the fundamentals of marksmanship, learning to drive a rifle. And yes, your rifle has a steering wheel, and if you want to learn to shoot to your fullest potential, you have to learn to drive. So, without further ado, here we go. So this past couple of weeks, I've had some customers out to the range that we have been working with, picking up new rifles, and some are school alumni. Some have been through the long-range shooting school, some have not. And one of the things, if I look back over the last, 18, 20 years, that's made our business on the custom rifle building side successful was the fact that a lot of our customers had been through the shooting school. So the fundamentals of marksmanship and learning how to shoot and use their rifle to its fullest abilities really showed well for our rifles out in the field. So we have a lot of happy customers. They're already skilled marksmen in the fact that they have a really good, strong understanding of the fundamentals of marksmanship. So when they're out shooting, they're happy with the rifle because they actually know how to use it well. But then the other part is while they're shooting, they're making good show. They're out with their buddies, they're out shooting them, they're out shooting in matches and placing well. That makes a big difference. So the reason this podcast, and I was trying to think about it for a while and how I wanted to title it, has come about was at the range over the last couple of weeks, I've had several customers picking up rifles, and I try to take a little bit of range time with them, get the rifle fitted up properly, sort of go over things with them, and it's a big investment, it's a big purchase, and it deserves a little bit more than just shipping them in a box and saying, here you go have fun. And for the customers that can make it, we'll try to get them a couple hours at the range or a half day range. And I'm blessed in the fact that I get to watch a lot of people shoot. And that comes from, again, like 2 decades or more than that, actually, of teaching and helping new shooters and even experienced shooters and watching the things that they're doing, changing what they're doing, and then watching the effects. So we sort of get to experiment sometimes because you'll see something you've never seen before, like just how people handle a rifle. So at the range here the last 2 weeks, I've noticed, and we teach this a lot at the shooting school, this is really important, is there's this thing with steering a rifle and not understanding on how to actually drive a rifle and get it to shoot where you want it to go properly. And, we fixed a couple of things we had a shooter here picking up his rifle, and I left him pick out his own bags. He picked out his shooting bags and stacked them all up wrong. He was shouldering the rifle wrong, and when he was shooting, he was okay. And just simply showing him how to steer a rifle properly, and I know I'm trying to use terminology that sort of hopefully makes sense, makes a world of difference. So just taking 5 minutes and changing up a couple things with the shooter, totally different shooter. Shooting groups in the threes with factory ammunition. You couldn't have peeled him off that he was just as happy as a lark. However, though, had I not taken 5 minutes and explaining these different little things that are really important, would have been the same experience. Would he have thought, well, is it me? Is it the gun? I don't understand why I can't shoot this way. And this isn't anything uncommon. So your rifle has a way that it needs to be shot that's very controlled through recoil. And how you handle the rifle makes every bit of difference that there can be. When you think about a rifle, how it's pointed, when you're going to change your elevation up and down, what's the first thing that you do? Well, you raise or lower the rear of the rifle stock. Same thing with left and right. the rear of the rifle stock is the furthest point from the muzzle and has the biggest effect. So if you move the rear of the rifle stock ever so slightly, the longer distances downrange, the more it moves your point of impact, whether it's up or down or left and right. So a very small adjustment with the rear of the rifle stock or allowing it to move improperly during recoil makes a huge difference. It's magnified. Let's just say it's 1x at 100 yards. It's 3x at 300 yards. This is the error. It's 400% at 400 yards. At 1,000 yards, your error is now magnified by more than 1,000%. This is how important this is. And so changing a couple things up with the shooter and teaching them that, hey, you've got to drive the rifle. There really is a steering wheel on a rifle, just like a boat has a rudder, just like how you fly an airplane. And all of this matters. How does it play into the marksmanship side? I want to go back, and I was trying to think of a way that I can do this on the podcast that would sort of make sense. If you take an archer, for example, and you look at an archer at full draw, usually I'm right-handed, so the bow would be in my left hand. I would be pulling the string back to my notch on my lip, right? But you'll see a lot of archers, they don't grip the bow. So they've got the bow settled into the U of the palm of their hand, and when they release the string, the bow falls forward and they either catch it or they have that little wrist strap. But as the momentum is going away from them, they don't have anything on the back side of the bow causing all kinds of issues as that energy is on the other side of the bow. So in other words, if you gripped it with all of your hand and you left it go, well, now you've got energy coming against your fingers that would be on the front of the bow, and that can influence, depending on how you grip it and control it, how the arrow's going to fly to the target, where it's going to hit in reference to the center of the target. Well, if you take your left hand and you put it straight out like you're holding a bow, and just with a U, so your forefingers on one side, your thumb on the other, but you're not gripping it, just open hand, and you turn that around and face it into your shoulder with four fingers on one side and your thumb on the other, you've made this U, or a raceway. Your rifle should ride in some type of raceway, controlling the left and right between your fingers. Now, we teach this with a set of shooting bags by Protector. They're called bunny ear bags. And they're these leather bags, and we insist that the students use them. Not that they're a handicap, and not that they're required to shoot fantastic, but they train you on how you're supposed to handle the rifle without the bag. So, for example, when we shoot with these Protector bags, you can look them up online. We'll have them here at the Armory for sale if you want to come and purchase one. If you come to the shooting school, you're going to see them. The reason we make new shooters shoot this way is because they're going to adjust to get on target up and down, left and right, and then they're going to pinch the ears to the stock. So they're pinching the outside of the leather ears, bracing the stock in between. And what that allows the rifle to do is when it's recoiling, just come straight back through the ears and be buffered. So it can't wiggle left and right or up and down. It tracks, sort of like what bench rest does. And you would be absolutely stunned on the difference it makes in accuracy. Then, if you're really good, you could remove that bag, and now you're going to, rather than pinching the ears to the stock, you're just going to pinch the stock with your fingers. Again, you're trying to control how the rifle recoils and how it's coming back straight. And so many people fall asleep at the wheel on this. So what happens is when they're pulling the trigger or they're shooting, the rifle isn't being controlled in the rear at all. It's just all this energy's coming back. It's bouncing, it's sliding, it's wiggling on your shoulder. It's trying to find that spot to settle in. You're being pushed back, and you really got no grip on the rifle the way you're supposed to. It's huge. Like, that's the only thing I changed with this shooter that we had at the range recently is I said, I left him stack his bags up and left him use his own shooting bags the way that he would normally shoot. And instantly I was like, oh yeah, I'm watching him shoot. I'm watching the rifle. I can see when the rifle is recoiling, it's not tracking straight. It's wobbling as it's coming back. It's all happening in a split second, but it throws your shots. You'll get that one flyer. You'll get the group where there's too high touching and too low touching because the rifle's settling in on a different spot of the shoulder for each shot. So he shot one high, one low, one back in his first shot, and then one in his second shot. So he shot 2 bullet holes, and he was baffled on how that happened. Well, it's because each time you're holding the rifle differently or settling in on a different spot on your shoulder, that's where the bullet was going. And so how does this work? Trying to break it down into a nutshell to where we can say in a less than a 30-minute podcast that this is super important for fundamentals of marksmanship. You've got to control the recoil into the shoulder, and you've got to direct the rifle how it's going to come back to the rear. You just can't let it go willy-nilly where it wants to go. You can't just rest it on a bag and reach up front where the grip is at and pull the trigger because you've got nothing supporting the rear of the rifle. As it's coming back, it's hitting your shoulder. It could be wobbling a little bit left and right. As it's recoiling, you've got nothing controlling it or telling it what to do. You've got to drive the rifle. Now, some mistakes that people will make when they're driving the rifle is their grips and how they're pinching and holding. When they loosen, so you'll see some people, they're holding the rear bag properly, like a protector bag, and then as soon as the shot breaks, they relax their hand. Or their hand is touching the stock and holding the bag, so as the rifle's recoiling, it's bouncing off the web of their hand as it's traveling through the bag, so it causes issues there. All of this stuff becomes really important, but let's talk about the grip for a minute. A lot of people try to will the bullet to go where they want it to go. And they do that with sheer strength and energy put into the rifle. So they're gripping it. They're all tensed up and they're like, yeah, and they're loading the bipod or pulling the rifle hard back into the shoulder. And it doesn't work that way. Imagine if you drove a car that way. Like I picture you doing that in a car when the 18-wheeler just crossed the center line and you're looking at it. At that point, you've got the death grip on the wheel, slamming on the brakes, and you're holding on for dear life, trying to will the car to go where you want it to go. Same thing happens in flying. I love pilots, by the way. We have tons of them that get into long-range shooting. They always have a checklist for everything, but then also they have a very soft grip. If you ever watch a real pilot fly, they don't have a death grip on the stick. It's actually like 1 or 2 fingers nice and lightly. They're guiding the airplane where they want it to go in a controlled manner. If you have a death grip like new students that are flying on the grip and they're trying to constantly fight the airplane and making it go where they want it to go, they're all over the place. Nice, easy grip. Same thing goes when you're shooting a rifle. You cannot will the bullet to go there. You have to do this with finesse. And it's not always the hardest grip that wins. So a nice, easy, firm handshake grip. Don't grip it like you're trying to squeeze blood out of the stock. A nice, easy pinch on the rear of the stock. You're trying to guide it, right? You're not trying to force it. You want the rifle, when it recoils, to come back, 2 to 3 pounds of energy or 2 to 3 foot-pounds of energy on the rear of the stock. So you don't want the rifle to launch into your shoulder. You don't want to be squeezing, pushing too hard forward, but you want to have this nice little give and takes where you shoot, the rifle slides to the rear, pushes you a little bit, then you push it back in the battery. You shoot, the rifle slides to the rear a little bit. Controlled, not a death grip on anything. Some of the best matches I ever shot in my life. I'll give you an example. In 2012, I was very lucky. I won the Allegheny Sniper Challenge, which is one of those matches that I always hope to win someday. I shot it for years. Really difficult match. And what shocked me the most was, and by the way, I didn't know I was winning the match until the match was over, and it was a 3-day match. So I don't keep score. I don't try to find out where I'm at in the standings. I just shoot. But what fascinated me was it was the most relaxed I've ever been while shooting. The first day, I think I had like 2 or 3 misses the entire day. And it was just like, it was almost like you hear people say, well, it feels like it's easy. I'm not willing the bullet to go anywhere. I'm getting online. I'm focusing on fundamentals. I'm nice and relaxed. I pull the trigger. It's hitting the steel. At the end of the day, I felt like I could whistle at my gun and say, and point, and it would just run over, set itself up and shoot and give me the points. I mean, it was amazing. And I never felt that way in a match before. I've always got that like extra tension or your excitement, and you're over concentrating, and you're gripping the wheel in panic mode. You're driving that rifle like you're out of control. And the other thing with like forcing the gun or willing it to go where you want it to go, it doesn't work. You can't force it with just sheer energy and strength and willpower. You can't just stare down the scope and grip everything super tight and damn it, that bullet is going to hit right where I want it to go. You're going to miss. You're going to miss. Look, go back to pilots. When they start to hit close to a stall or on takeoff, one of the most dangerous things pilots can do, and this costs a lot of pilots their lives, is something happens, some type of an emergency where they either lose power and they're low. And so the first thing they do, they pull up. They don't push the nose down to maintain airspeed or control the airplane. They try to will the airplane to go higher up in the air, and it's not going. And as soon as they do that, they lose the rest of their forward momentum, and they stall, and they crash into the ground. You cannot will the rifle to hit the target. It's all finesse. It's like when you're getting set up to take that shot, be calm, be confident. Think about how you're gripping and holding everything. Let the rifle naturally do what it's supposed to do in recoil and coming back straight, and you just simply guide it where it's supposed to go. And it will go there every single time. So a great example was, again, we were at the range with a customer. Customer was picking up his new rifle, and I'm watching him shoot, which, like I said, I'm very blessed that I get to watch people shoot all the time, and I get to see all the crazy things and really get to help a lot of people because, let's be honest, we don't get to watch ourselves shoot. I mean, nobody really has a selfie stick in real time that you get to watch and critique your own shots. It just doesn't happen. So having a set of eyes watching you and helping you, and all of a sudden you're doing something, you had no idea you were doing it. And just simply somebody pointing it out made a world of difference. And not only just how you're shooting, but how much you're enjoying shooting, it just means the world to me. I just love it. So the customers there, I'm watching them set up, and I try to let them do their own thing. I try not to be overpowering right away and say, okay, here, you're doing this wrong. Here, you're doing that wrong. Here, you're doing this wrong. That really is a bad way to approach things. So I just left him do his own thing, get a couple rounds through the gun, get the scope set up properly, talk him through some of the things that he's doing, make sure the length of the pull is good. And then after he got a couple rounds through the gun, then addressed and said, here, let me give you a couple pointers. Let me show you a couple tricks here. And it was just like a totally different shooter. And it was just simply teaching him how to drive the rifle, how to control it without overbearing it, panic mode, gripping the wheel, or completely letting go, and just letting the rifle naturally go all over the place, which doesn't work well either. But getting him in that routine that, okay, here's how it's supposed to work. We're guiding it. And, it's not just amateurs that suffer with this. Guys that win 1,000-yard bench just still struggle with this. Like, they're trying to touch the rifle as little as possible, but they still got to make the gun fire. They got to get it in and out of battery. They are handling the gun. And so we had just a world-class shooter here maybe 3-4 weeks ago, and we're talking about some of his targets, and he shot some fantastic 1,000-yard groups, 10-shot groups. But he still has, every once in a while, he gets the vertical stringing going on, and he's not quite understanding, like, okay, how is that happening? I know my standard deviation is spot on. I know, he's OCD, ADD, and all that he does. So, how it was sliding through the bags, how much resistance, how hard was he jamming up against the stop at the front? There's so many variables that this is a dance, and as you keep going, you'll keep fine-tuning it. Like in his case, he's a world-class shooter, but he still is not perfect, and I don't know if any of us ever could strive to really meet that. The perfect 10-shot group at 1,000 yards. But he's still vulnerable to the same things that we are when we handle the rifle shooting prone. So I'm going to share with you a couple more tips about this and try to just make this a good, solid fundamentals, food to think about type podcast. When you find that sweet spot, like back in your shoulder, like I shoot a little bit angled to the gun. I don't shoot straight behind it. The reason I do that is it forms a little pocket, a little bit better for me because my shoulder's a little bit narrower, for the rifle butt to set and get trapped into. So if I try to shoot the rifle straight, like which is traditionally taught, and some people can do that just fine, my shoulders are narrow, the rifle usually rides on my collarbone. I don't really have an area for the rifle buttstock to set into, and you don't want it out on the ball of your shoulder. That's the wrong place for it. So what I've adopted to over the years is I'm a little bit more angled to the gun, and what that does is as you swing around prone on the gun, when your shoulder's raised up, it creates a little bit of a pocket there right before the ball of your shoulder. And the rifle buttstock sits perfectly in there. Then, on top of that, you're going to find the sweet spot where the rifle up and down is just sitting in a shoulder perfect, cheek weld, cheek pressure. There's a set distance. The rear of the rifle is going to be off the ground. That's going to be this really sweet spot. And for me, it's actually the exact height of the protector bags. I mean, I have other shooting bags that we use that aren't bunny ear bags, per se, where I'll set my hand on the bag and I'll use my fingers to pinch the stock to sort of give it a raceway or track back into my shoulder. But I have this sweet spot that's actually a little bit higher than what most people think. Like I'm more up on my shoulders than laying flat prone with my arms straight out. So I'm supporting my weight with skeleton. I'm not using muscle. But that allows me a really good, nice, comfortable position for the rifle to be off the ground, right? It's that perfect height of the buttstock off the ground to where my face and eye relief, everything's really comfortable. I'm not straining my neck. I'm not too low where I'm trying to bend my neck backwards to look through my optics, or I'm not too high. Getting up a little bit higher on the rear allows you to naturally look forward a little bit better. So when you're too low, what happens is you've got to tilt your head back to be able to look straight through your optics the lower that you go. And so I find just a couple inches off the ground allows me to sort of relax that, so I'm sort of looking naturally straight through my optics rather than sort of bending my neck back too far. But here's another mistake that's common for shooters that they'll do when trying to get the rifle to drive properly is rather than adjusting the bipod to this nice sweet spot for elevation, they start sliding bags or stacking or taking away bags from the rear. Well, that changes a lot on how well you're going to shoot. In a pinch, yeah, you can do that. But as you raise and lower the rear of the rifle to adjust for elevation up and down on target, you are raising and lowering how you look through your optics, how you're up off the ground with your shoulders. Now you're flatter down with your arms out. So you're really changing everything fundamentally about how you handle the rifle in this natural position that you're going to shoot from. So your A game, which might be for me the height of the protector bags with a little bit thicker base on it, that is a really sweet spot for me in the back of the rifle. That's a perfect height for me to be naturally looking through the optics without straining my neck, for me to be comfortable up on my elbows a little bit more, so I'm supporting with the weight of my body and everything with my elbows more tucked in rather than flat out. If I change the height up and down to make in the rear for elevation, I'm going to change, not only just where my elbows are at on the ground supporting weight, but also how I'm looking through my optics, where my face is planted, how far forward I'm leaning, how far back I'm leaning. So what I tell new shooters especially, if you have the time, once you find this really sweet spot at the rear of the rifle where you're driving it from, adjust for elevation up and down from the front first. Adjust your bipod. Leave the rear of the rifle alone. That is your sweet spot for the rifle. So once you find that is your A game. Everything else is a compromise from that point as far as driving the rifle. So reach up if you're taking a shot where you got to reach up real quick and add a click to your bipod to get up high enough, or lower a click down to get low enough on target. Do that first if you have the time. Now, if you don't have time, then you're going to compromise the quality of the shot in order to make up or to make the shot faster. So there's a trade-off. If you need to make the shot faster, you're going to compromise the quality of the shot by jerking the rifle up and down from the rear that way rather than adjusting it from the bipod first. So in the name of speed, like a hunter, for example, the elk is at 300 yards and walking off the field. Wrong time to be adjusting your feet up and down in the front. You're not going to miss the animal if you're still fundamentally sound by adjusting the rear of the rifle up or down quickly. Are you going to compromise the shot a little bit? Probably a little bit, but not big enough to make a huge difference on the animal to not harvest. There's a big difference between harvesting an animal and shooting a 10 ring, right? We're killing an animal to take it home, right? To eat it and all the good things that come with why we hunt. But if you made that 1,000-yard shot, all of a sudden that becomes a lot more critical. Remember, it's not a factor of 3x error now, it's a factor of 10x. So the error that you're introducing for the, in essence, expediency of the shot is multiplied by 10 because of the distance. So at that point, you have to ask yourself, Am I compromising too much that I'm going to shank the shot? Or should I try to take the time to adjust the front to get the best shot that I can and risk the animal walking off the field and having to wait for another day? Those are ethics. You have to decide that yourself. We've seen it where people have tried to rush and take shots on animals, and not people that I shoot with on a regular basis or even hunt with, just people we were at camps with. And, they just totally screw up the shot fundamentally, trying to rush the shot at a shot that was too far out anyway, and even in perfect conditions would be fundamentally challenging, and they miss. And so you have to ask yourself, is it worth the risk of either wounding the animal or just a complete miss, then just wait and try to get closer, circle around, try to cut them off, wait for them to come back out that evening? Those are all personal questions you have to ask yourself. But when you're setting up in these situations, if time becomes an essence, it's a compromise. Are you going to focus on the quality of shot, which sometimes takes a little bit longer for that setup, or are you going to rush the shot to try to get the bullet down quicker, in which case you're going to compromise potential accuracy or shot placement? So before we continue on, I do want to say a quick thanks to Krieger Barrels. Krieger is a maker of fine cut rifled barrels. They do have in stock and readily available barrels at Kriegerdirect.com, so you can stop over, get your barrel ordered ASAP, and have it in hand before the shooting season begins. Also, you can check out their sales section where they post up different barrels that they have in inventory, so you can go down there and look through different contours and twist rates, sometimes finding exactly what you're looking for or something close that would work. So right now, the lead time on barrels can get really long, so you can go over to Kriegerdirect.com and get your barrel in as quick as 2 to 3 days, which would be pretty awesome. So Kriegerdirect.com. We also want to say thank you to Triggertech. Triggertech makes what we believe one of the finest hunting and match triggers on the planet, from the diamond right down to the primary. They make a new 2-stage trigger for bolt-action rifles in both the special and the diamond, in which we are building a lot of rifles on. So way to go, Triggertech, on just great quality, super safe triggers. And we say it all the time that if you're going to put a trigger in your gun or to upgrade your trigger, why not put the best in there? And we believe that is Triggertech. Last but not least, we do want to thank Mdt Chassis. Mdt Chassis is also a proud sponsor. They make a full line of custom chassis that go from the ACC right down to the Oryx, and the Oryx being one of our favorite entry-level chassis that they make. Then you also have a bunch of new stuff coming out, so keep an eye out at mdttac.com. That's mdttac.com. They have some really new and exciting stocks that are coming on the market soon that I think is going to be a nice game changer and additional options for us as shooters. So continuing on with the driving the rifle and the concept behind it, don't be afraid to get professional training on this. This is something where years and years of watching shooters, evaluating the movement of the rifle is so huge. Like years past, we used to use the 223 at the shooting school because it allowed us to watch the movement of the rifle very closely and how it's engaging the shooter, how it's moving during the shot, and really just fine-tune the rifle quickly. Now that we're suppressed and shooting 6.5 Creedmoors and 22 Creedmoors, we can do the same thing, but you have to know what you're looking for. But don't be afraid to go and get professional training. There are people that really know what this means. You know, it's like a friend of ours and a good customer worked his whole life, and one of his dream cars was the Hellcat. And he ended up purchasing one. One heck of a car. They gave, with the purchase of the car, a driving school specifically for the car in which professional drivers would teach you. And Dave's comment to me was that when they did a lap with the professional driver, he had no idea the car could do that, and that he certainly was borderline of having some type of accident in the car. He said it was that impressive. He said it just startled the daylights out of him. He thought for sure he's going to die in a couple turns, you know, that there's so much power. But when you learn how to drive the car properly, what the car is capable of doing, and how to communicate with the car, then all of a sudden it becomes a tool. And you can do absolutely amazing things like the professional driver did when he took Dave for a lap in a Hellcat. Now, I'm hoping that Dave doesn't go out and try to emulate what he learned at the school on any public streets anytime soon. But it's just the case in point here is that a lot of times we don't take the time to think about how we properly work in unison with the shot and how critical that is. Learn to drive the rifle. That's a technique. There is feel, there is touch to it, there is feedback from the rifle on whether you did it right or wrong, that you become so tuned up with the rifle that it's like your best friend when you pull up to shoot. You know, the rifle just seats where it's supposed to do, and you're just, in your mind, you're like, oh yeah, this is going to be a good shot. That's where you want it to be. But you have to learn how to drive the rifle to get to that position. So when you're going out and practicing and applying this, try to keep that and all these little things that we were talking about and dealing with and controlling the rear of the rifle. Make that a big focus for your training for a little while and see if you can't dial down both the left and right shots that are rolling outside, like say 100-yard precision work or 200 yards where the wind isn't a factor, but then also that repeatability. Can you do it over and over again? Can you do it getting on and off the rifle? You know, that is learning to build this technique with the rifle. And we'll continue on with that maybe in the next podcast. I do want to say thank you for taking the time for listening to the podcast. And I also want to ask that if you like the podcast and enjoy it, if you don't mind posting a nice comment for us or giving us a nice star rating, it really helps us get found on all of the platforms that are available out there. You also can stop over to our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, and you can, keep up to date with some of the stuff that we're doing there. We really appreciate you tagging in and chiming in on there. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us here. Like I said, the podcasts are going to be about every other week until we get set up at our new facility. We are building a little podcasting room there, so there'll be a small transition getting the podcast set up there. But thank you so much for taking the time to join us here at the show. We really do appreciate it. My name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you're listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.